Hello my loyal companions, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be going over a shooting range warm-up routine that I use to help me just warm up for my games, to feel confident going into a ranked match or into a strikeout match, and get that aim nice and where I want it, as well as some other basic skills that are so important towards my Rogue Company game. If you do go on to enjoy the video or you just want to see daily, educational, Rogue Company content, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. But for now, let's get into it. Warming up in Rogue Company isn't just as simple as going to shooting range and shooting some targets. There's certain things you can do to optimize your time in there and focus on the core skills that are necessary within the game. Those core skills and the different things I'm going to show you here in this video are going to help you with your accuracy, particularly focusing on headshots, going to help you with your hipfire, with your movement, with your melees, with your tracking, with your snapping, and also then with using your environment to your advantage. But the first thing is that when you load into shooting range, you need to pick whichever rogue is going to be most useful for you. Now you may just want to pick the rogue that you main or that you use most often, you're most likely to use in your ranked games, and that is absolutely fine. But if you're just looking for a more general warm-up, I'd recommend a few certain rogues who have good weapons, but also have replenish, because they will be able to give you your bullets back immediately and you don't have to worry about reloading. Some rogues that are particularly good for this include Ronin, who has the SMG and the AR, which are great practice, and she has replenish as well. You have Dahlia, who can then float between the DMR as well as an SMG. Or if you want to practice against high recoil, you could go something like Anvil, who has a big LMG, which has lots of bullets, which means you can avoid the reloading as well. Or of course, if you're looking to practice your sniping, pick Phantom or Fixer. Personal recommendation for me is actually going to be Phantom, but that's down to your preference. Either way, pick a rogue that you want to go into shooting range with, and then you can start practicing the skills that I'm going to show you right now. Now, the first thing you want to practice and work on when you enter shooting range is your general accuracy, particularly focusing on hitting headshots across different ranges. For this, you're simply going to want to go to each different range of target and start shooting them, not worrying about shoulder swapping, not worrying about your movement or rolling, just purely focusing on that recoil control with your weapon, and you're aiming to hit headshots at every single interval. Depending on which weapon you're using, you may not be able to hit some ranges with headshots only. For example, if you're using an AR, hitting the furthest target with headshots only is going to be kind of rough. Whereas if you're using a DMR, it should be pretty natural. Or if you're using SMGs, only hitting headshots on the first 2 targets only is probably what you're looking at. But it depends on what weapon you're using and you want to be practicing accordingly. But either way, you're looking for that accuracy. You're looking to be landing every single shot and hitting as many headshots as possible while controlling the recoil. You may choose to do this with full bursts of your weapon or maybe just short one taps, depending on what you're most likely to use that weapon with during the game. This particular portion will take up a fair amount of your time within your warm-up routine because you really want to harness that shot, feel that recoil, and just practice it on these stationary targets before we move on to moving targets later on in some of the other skills. Getting a feel for recoil patterns and warming up that initial stationary shot is really good to start your warm-up routine because it's going to help you flow into the other skills you're going to need later on, which I'm also going to go into now. The next one I want you to look at is going to be hipfire. Hipfire, whether it be with a pistol, whether it be with an SMG or an AR or any other weapon, is a really, really important skill that you need to be able to utilize. That means I want you to be practicing this within Rogue Company warm-up practice shooting range as well. I want you to jump over the barricade towards the stationary targets and start moving between them, focusing only on hipfire. You don't have to worry about your shoulder swaps or rolling or any form of movement. We'll get to that later. You just want to be moving in and out of range of some of these targets, going really up close to them, going further away to get some more distance hipfire, but just focusing on that hipfire and controlling that even more accelerated burst. By doing this, you're going to be a lot more confident going into hipfire fights, and you can just manage that recoil a little bit better, get used to sort of battling against the massive spray patterns that these hipfire weapons typically cause, and also especially with single shot weapons, say the Executioner or a DMR, it will really help you because those hipfire kills when people rush you up close are so crucial. So being confident to hit them on these targets is going to be important, and particularly making sure you're focusing between headshots and body shots where you feel it's appropriate. Transitioning onto this is going to be working on your movement. Now, movement is one of the most important things within Rogue Company and absolutely worth warming up. But it may be a little bit harder in shooting range than you'd expect. What I tend to do to warm up in shooting range for my movement is, again, jump over the barricade towards these stationary targets and focus on being really, really movement heavy when I'm bouncing between targets. I want to be rolling, shoulder swapping, crouch spamming if that is something you use within your games, and moving between the targets as quickly as possible. I want to be putting myself almost under time pressure as if I need to get to the next target as quickly as possible, and that forces my movement to be snappier and more reactive, which is really important. I also wouldn't recommend going from 1 target to 2 target to 3 target to 4 target in all that pattern every single time. Mix it up. Maybe go from 4 to 1 to 3 to 2, or whatever it be. Mix it up with the patterns, mix it up with the targets, so you feel a little bit more confident as you move between them. Again, movement and situations in the game don't happen in a set order, so being a bit more reactive in how you move, how you roll, how you shoulder swap is going to be really important. And of course, again, hip fire crouch spam, if you do use it, is probably worth practicing here as well, just so you can get that added accuracy that is so important when you crouch spam, because it really can mess with your aim. Once you feel confident with your movement, you feel confident with your general accuracy and your hip fire, I actually say pick up a melee weapon and give it a go. Melee weapons are not necessarily underrated anymore, but they are still not being used to their fullest potential. Melee weapons can absolutely change games and force enemies into really tough positions when you can get that instant down threat pressure. So you want to be practicing with them, just bounce between the stationary targets, being really, again, really focused on that movement, that reactive, that sort of long shots, those close range ones, and just start throwing them about just so you're a bit more confident with them. Just, again, feel what it's like to move from not looking at a target to quickly snapping onto a target and throwing that melee weapon. You just want to be jumping about, running about, and trying to throw some, pick it back up, throw it at the next target, and be quick and reactive. And I tend to find this does help me a little bit. Again, though, moving actually into a real game scenario is much more important for practicing melee weapons, but you may find it a little bit useful just to warm it up a little bit here in this shooting range warm-up. So now that you've worked on your accuracy, your hip fire, your movement, and your melee throws, it's time to now focus on some of the more moving targets where you'll get a bit more in-game scenario type feel out of those core skills you've practiced. And I'll show you the exact things that I want you to practice when you move to the moving targets. The first really big thing that I want you to look at is your tracking. And this means you following targets that are moving. Of course, with the moving targets, you can do this a lot easier than you can with the stationary targets because they don't move. The way I like to do this is not continuously look at one of the moving targets and shoot them, wait for them to respawn, shoot them off their spawn. I like to sort of add a little bit more chaos in the mix. So what I tend to do is I let the first target run up a bit, I shoot them down, I work on my tracking, making sure I'm moving with them, making sure I'm hitting consistent shots and headshots as well. Again, you always want to be focusing on headshots where you can using these warm-ups because that's what's really going to impact your accuracy. And then after I've killed one target of the moving ones, I turn around, find the other one as quickly as possible because it's also going to help actually locating targets, and then shoot that one and make sure I'm tracking them, whether they go up the stairs, whether they're going down the stairs, or whether they're just moving across from me, moving quickly to that target and then tracking them, and then turning around after that kill and tracking the one behind me again, and it just continues in this cycle of I'm looking at one, I'm tracking their movement and shooting them with their movement, then I instantly turn around and have to locate the next target and track them along. This adds a little bit more flair and a little bit more dynamic shooting and warm-up to your routine, and is definitely worth it. Again, tracking is such an important skill, so being able to move between these targets and follow them really consistently is important. This, again, should take up a considerable amount of your warm-up time with the different weapons that you're trying out. Now we're going to look at another really important skill, and this is snapping between targets. This is really important if you come up in a situation where you have to deal with multiple people at a time. Being able to snap between targets and go from one to the other really quickly while still maintaining good accuracy is really important, and that is why we train it here in this warm-up routine. The best way I practice snapping between targets is to look at the three with the one moving and two up on the left and right, and bounce between them. So I'll go from the left to the middle to the right, and then mix up the pattern. Maybe I'll go left to right, then to middle, or whatever it be. I'm mixing up these patterns so it doesn't feel consistent and stale. So I'm just keeping it going, shooting from one to the other, and making sure I'm confident that I'm able to snap to them. The snapping element really comes from the un-ADS to ADS at the next target, and trying to get that crosshair on them by the time you've ADS. So being able to move between them really, really quickly. And that's kind of what you're building up here as a skill, is you're building up how quickly you can move between target and target while maintaining accuracy really well. And that, again, is something I want you to pick up on. And with the moving target thrown in there as well, it makes it even harder because, again, you can't just predict that you're going from left to middle to right. It may be slightly different. Maybe the target is further left, maybe they're further right than last time. It forces you to be a little bit more adaptable and not just work on muscle memory, which is really important when you move to this moving target stage of the warm-up routines. Once you've spent a significant amount of time on your snapping and your tracking on these other skills we've looked at, you want to be looking at now using your environment a little bit more to help you with some of these kills. What I mean by this is not just standing in one spot or doing small movements to adjust for your aim, but instead get right up in the faces of these bots, get behind some cover and start playing behind cover, peeking out of it and not spending too much time peeked out, getting as much damage as you can before going back in, and then re-peeking to do a little bit more damage. Maybe it's rolling off, taking some height, maybe getting some height advantage, whatever it be, but using the environment a little bit more, moving around the space, finding targets, shooting at range, shooting up close, maybe even throwing a melee in there every once in a while as well, and just using your environment a little bit more than you would be by just standing still and shooting these targets. By doing this, you're feeling a little bit more adaptable, you're thinking a little bit more on your feet about where you need to go and how you can use cover to your advantage, which will only help translate well into your actual games that you're going to be playing very, very soon. This is the final stage of the warm-up routine, but is also really important, so don't skip it. Make sure that you are trying to use cover to your advantage and not peeking out for too long, because if you imagine a real game situation, that might force a really bad trade. So peek up, do as much damage as you can in a few seconds, then peek back down, and then re-peek it to finish off that kill, if that's what you can do. That pretty much concludes the warm-up routine, but you may choose to redo it again with a different rogue. Maybe you want to now practice your sniping, and in which case a lot of these skills still stand, maybe not the hip fire as much or the movement with sniping, but they probably do as well if you want to be a really good sniper. But you want to be practicing these different skills and making sure you're really consistent on whatever weapons you're choosing to use, whether it be just using the K30 on Ronin for a consistent sort of general sort of warm-up, or whether it be using the DMR if you're a Dahlia main, whether it be using the Riptide if you're a Kestrel main, whatever it be, this warm-up routine can be applied to all rogues in all situations to help you just get a little bit warmed up before your actual matches. Okay then guys, that takes us to the end of the video, and if you did enjoy, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You can also come follow me on twitch.tv/RADTHARGAMING, see live gameplay commentaries, guides, Q&As, and playing with viewers. All the links you're going to need are down in the description below, but for now, I hope you have a fantastic day. And remember, be loyal, be brave, be relentless, and I'll catch you in the next video.